What is up, everybody? This is Kaz Denizon with Kraz Productions with yet again another Atari Dev Space interview. And today we are joined by Paul Good, who was the director to Hover Hunter, also known as Phase Zero. How are you doing today, man?
All right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, go
There's a, there's a,
ahead.
there's a slight delay here, so I just want to give you a heads up on that. I think the videos will probably
Okay.
match, but
Yep.
so
Standard Zoom meeting stuff.
all kinds of errors. So, okay. So let's go ahead and start with. So you were worked with a company that was initiated in the 1990s for the Atari Jaguar, known as Hyper Image, correct?
I started that company.
So walk me through the process of just out of curiosity, what made you want to get into video game development, and what was it like assembling your team? I understand you also worked with your brother. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was crazy. The whole thing was completely insane. Um, and a lot of it was us sort of stumbling our way into that. Uh, not not as intentionally as you might think. Um, the beginning of the story that's relevant is I got in a car crash that almost killed me, but I lost my spleen, I broke ribs, all kinds of stuff, and the insurance company just dropped a bunch of money on me because it wasn't my fault. It was somebody else crashed the car and almost killed me. So I suddenly found myself with tens of thousands of dollars, and in the early '90s, all I wanted to do was computer graphics, and at that time, if you want to do computer graphics, you got to get on like a Silicon Graphics machine or something. You
Right.
couldn't just pull up your 8086 and make the graphics for Terminator 2, which was the bar at that time. And it was like, okay, I got thousands of dollars sitting around. I'm going to buy myself an SGI. And I started looking around at that, and I I sort of teamed up with a friend of my brother's who was going to college at the time, and we started going to SGI demos and talking to sales reps and stuff, and looking at like, oh geez, like these things are seriously like 100,000 plus, and I don't have that kind of money. And while we were looking at that, he was hacking the Super Nintendo. Like in those days, you could pirate console games with copiers that were like a cartridge that you plug in and load onto a floppy or over the parallel port or whatever. And it was like a hacking and homebrew and demo scene that he was getting into. And partway through this sort of quest to get better computer graphics hardware, we were like, shit, we could make video games. Like, do we really want to do graphics, or do we want to like do something more than that? And so it started out as Super Nintendo hacking, and then at that time, the Jaguar and 3DO were coming onto the scene, and I was an Atari fanboy from back in the day, so we went straight for that.
Right.
And certainly on paper, the Jaguar looked like the most powerful thing ever. Um, so that's the quick story of like how and why we went in that direction and how we ended up like making a game development company and then getting licensed on the Jaguar first thing.
If I remember correctly, I read that you guys also had licenses for 3DO and PlayStation at one point, but never were able to initiate anything in that general direction. Was that right?
I don't remember if we got on the 3DO. I'm
Uh,
trying to remember if we ever got on that.
I found
Um,
just in my general research, I found an old interview from GameZero.com. It doesn't have a
oh,
date.
the Game Zero interview. I
Oh,
remember that one.
you do? So I don't
Oh
know if you
yeah,
can see it because it's probably going to try to. Ah, I
yeah.
hate
It's
screwing
trying to it's
Zoom
trying to
things.
make it disappear. Yeah, it's
But,
got the little thumbnail there. Yeah, I remember that interview.
but yeah, you guys had somebody specifically. If I can find it.
Somebody said we had a 3DO license.
Yeah, because you guys were asked something along the lines of like your favorite games, like what do you like to play?
Hmm.
It said you said Doom and Virtua Fighter 2, which by the way, man,
Yeah,
I'm a huge Virtua Fighter fan myself.
yeah,
So like
yeah,
I've even seen the old cartoons, man. I'm a 90s kid. I was born in 91. So like a
yeah.
lot of the stuff that you're probably talking about from like the 80s and 70s, I may not resonate with as much, but I've been
Sure.
for the years become a huge Atari fan if you can't tell.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I'm pretty sure I read in here something about a license from 3DO. And
Yeah, I'm just saying I can't remember it. That was, we're going on 30 years here.
it's been a minute.
Um,
Absolutely.
and if we were licensed on the 3DO, we never did a damn thing with it. Like we never went beyond getting the license. What I remember was we got the license on the Jaguar, and that's a whole other story in itself. We drove straight through for like 18 hours to get to a CES and fell asleep in the parking lot. And it was a crazy day. But soon after that, the Saturn and PlayStation came out, and we were like, all right, let's get licensed on those if we can. Like we were in the middle of working on, Hover Hunter Phase Zero, whatever it was called at the time those came out. We were like, yeah, we want to be a console development company, and we don't necessarily want to be exclusive to anything. Maybe we put this game on those platforms or whatever we're doing. We want to be capable of doing whatever we can do. So we talked to those companies, and just having the Atari license and being like front and center on Jaguar promotion stuff just got us in the door for those, which we didn't expect. Like we went from a bunch of kids hacking the Super Nintendo, making it all up as we went along, to like being able to just walk into one of these companies and be like, hey, yeah, we're a game developer. Check it out. And they go, oh, all right, you guys are game developers. Yeah, sure. Here, get licensed on our console. And so by the time Atari folded and finally cut everything off, we had licenses and some information and everything for the Saturn and PlayStation, and we were already looking for other work at that point because Atari hadn't been paying us for months, and we were like, yeah, all right, we gotta start looking for other stuff to do. And so we started on a Saturn project almost immediately after Atari canned everything.
It was
So that was the trajectory I remember. Was we went Jaguar and then queued up the Saturn and PlayStation, and then ended up on the Saturn soon after the Jaguar.
Yeah, because you got, I read somewhere that I think it was like 98 or 99, you guys ended up working on, what was it, Blood and Iron or Iron Blood? Some kind of
Iron
like,
and Blood, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Got stories about that one too. That was
Okay.
it was a terrible game. It's just a terrible game. It was destined to be a terrible game from the beginning.
I believe it was, I don't know if you know who Matt McMuscles is. He's a YouTuber. He does like video game reviews.
No,
And it's like, he does reviews for like some of the worst video games available. And it's
that's
actually
that's one
made
of them.
one of them, yeah.
Yeah,
I have to ask, like, I mean, like you said yourself, it's nearly 30 years ago. I mean, obviously the Jaguars might as well for today's generation might as well be a relic, you know. Granted,
well, yeah. No,
I
most
was
people
born
haven't even heard of it.
I mean, I was born in the decade that it was, you know, in the market, but I was also too young to really understand the gravity of like, you know, corporate legislation and logistics. But I know that as
Yeah.
a kid, I really wanted one. I was so sold on the
Oh yeah.
advertising as a kid, you know. And
It was like,
my first console was a NES and Super Nintendo. Those are my first two consoles, and those are my
mhm.
mother's actually. And so, I mean, I grew up on Power Rangers, Metroid, Mario, Adventure Island, Donkey Kong, like the classics, you know what I mean? Like the 90s
Yep.
classics.
Yep.
And for me, like getting into the Jaguar as a collector and such, I've found more excitement and enjoyment out of that. And ironically enough, with 3DO, although I don't own a 3DO, I've emulated. I've played a lot of games that I thoroughly enjoy. There's something different. I don't know how to say it. It's the way the games are structured, the visuals, the presentation. It's unlike anything that's available today. You know, and I think
Yeah.
because of how dated it is, it really holds up as kind of like an art. That might be
Yeah.
overselling it, but that's how I feel. Um,
No, no, it's that's perfectly legit. Like you're not wrong. There's a lot of reality to that.
I'm a huge fan of like the dated FMVs. You know, like Cycle Burn, for
Yeah.
example, for the CDI,
Right.
or
Right.
Burn Cycle, excuse me.
Night Trap is the infamous one.
Yes, dude. Sewer Sharks as well.
Yeah.
Don't forget about that one. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. There's something about old FMV that just ticks all my boxes. I love the
Yeah.
cheesiness. I love the dated graphics. I love how they managed to integrate gameplay into full motion video. And I've
hmm
played full motion videos today, like Erica, for example, on PlayStation. And as great as that game is, it's just not the same, you know. Um, but I have
hmm
to ask. I mean, do you maybe miss like the 1990s? Like, was that like the highlight of your
Absolutely.
youth?
I mean, I'm not going to call it the highlight of anything. I've done all kinds of stuff in every decade of my life.
Okay.
But there were a lot of great things going on in the 90s, and I miss a lot of it right now. I'm not one for nostalgia really. I don't really like, I don't do retro gaming because I want to collect things or because I have a lot of nostalgia. I do it because I still find interesting things, you know? I mean, there were thousands and thousands of games and I didn't get to play all of them in the 80s or 90s, and there's still really interesting ones to discover.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not going to limit myself to new games. Um, but yeah, I mean, every era has its own thing going on, and there's a lot to be said for what was happening in the 90s, the tech boom that my company was riding. Like, we were surfing the wave of the, the information superhighway was coming, like everybody was just tripping over themselves trying to make money in tech. And the internet and computers in general were exploding into the general consciousness. And I mean, to go back to a thing that you mentioned, and this is a thing that I talk to people about all the time when I have conversations like this. um, the first E3 in I think it was 95, like the summer of 95, I think was the first E3, was a really pivotal point for video games. Like, you can point to that as a fulcrum that all kinds of things pivoted on. And like, a few of the really obvious things are the Saturn and PlayStation got released at that E3.
Right.
And that was, for all intents and purposes, like the major push into 3D for home games, Like the Jaguar and 3DO had definitely done it a few years earlier, but it wasn't until Sony and Sega dropped a lot of money into the arena that the public at large picked up on this stuff and everybody started gaming in 3D. The other big thing that's really obvious that people were talking about a lot at the time was the E3 was the first video game show that was just the video game industry. And it was a really big moment of the video game industry saying, hey, we're our own thing. Like, video games are big enough that we are not just an attachment to consumer electronics in general. We're not just like, we're not going to, play second fiddle or whatever to, like, oh, like there's Hollywood and there's the music industry. And then there's, I guess, video games are like toys for kids.
Right.
That was the point where it switched over, where the video game industry was just like, no, check us out. We're making as much money as any of those other industries. We're very much as legitimate a business as anything. And despite what anybody thought after the crash in the mid 80s, video games were clearly here to stay at that point. And so there was a really, really big shift that happened there. And some of the things that you're talking about, like older games feeling different, it's very real. There's a lot of things that happened around then that just sort of like, it pivots around about 1995, and anything before then was in this old school gaming mode where it was like nerds and experimentation and working with every last little bit you could, timing things on the bus and figuring out how to like optimize the assembly language. And that, the programmers wanted to be on the metal. They wanted to like really get in there and suck every last drop of performance out. And then you had, like, with the PlayStation, Sony just dropped a bunch of libraries on everybody and we're like, here, you program in C++, go. And you don't even need to program the chips. And then when Nintendo put out the N64, they didn't even give anybody assembly libraries at first. I don't remember the details on that one, but that was another step in the direction of like, no, you're programming high level now. Like, we control the hardware, we give you the drivers, the APIs, whatever, and you just program the game.
Right.
And these days, with things like the Unity and Unreal Engine, it's gone so much further in that direction where like video game programmers are no longer about like getting that pixel timing down another few cycles so that you can get another few frame rates. Like, they're disconnected from that. They don't know anything about that. They just, you drag and drop a 3D file into the engine interface and like make the game, and it's got all these like visual language plugins and everything. And it's a really, really different world. And there's a lot to be said for the way we were doing things in the old days, and like the connection and awareness that it gave from top to bottom. You couldn't be a game programmer without understanding the hardware you were working on.
Right.
And that led to a culture of game developers and gamers who were more invested in like every aspect of the hardware and software and everything that they were doing. And it was much less of like a consumer throwaway culture where it's just like, oh yeah, you get another mobile game, you push the button, you pay another $5 for your little stupid in-game money with your pay-to-win models and whatever, and like some of that stuff has gotten completely out of hand now, and it just didn't exist back then.
I have to say personally, I mean, like, I love like coin co-ops and stuff like that, like arcades and stuff, but the whole pay to win
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I was like, I was really invested in a game called GOG or Guns of Glory, like when it first came out. I ran a guild.
I've heard of that one. I'm not familiar with it, but yeah.
It's super toxic. Like, so they give you everything that you need, and I'll make this quick, but they give you everything you need to like build up like your kingdom and everything, and then go and fight other people and stuff. But then like once you hit like level 10, they slap you with the whole pay to win wall. And so like
Yeah.
you end up as this weak little level 10 fighting like level 50
Yeah.
people. And it's insane. And then they have it with like so many first person shooters now. That's why I like the Atari VCS, or I like other niche consoles like the Playdate, or there's these two things that I'm actually getting ready to purchase now. One's called Next Playground, which is more for kids, but I just want to see it as a curiosity. But then there's a new console called Game Night that launched literally this year in January that I'm going to get just to
Mhm.
try and see if it's like worth it. Um, but it's gaming today compared to nostalgic gaming, like popping in like a Sega Saturn game or 3DO game, or
Yeah.
other niche stuff like Philips CDI or Jaguar. It really doesn't feel the same, and
Yeah.
you're I'm kind of going off the rails here. I'm so sorry. Just
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
kind of
All good.
just to kind of pivot back to Hover Hunter or Phase Zero. One
Hmm.
question I want to ask is, why did you guys decide to change the name?
We didn't.
You didn't?
Uh, yeah, it's ancient history now, so I don't have to worry about pissing anybody off. So I don't have to mince words here. But we told Atari what we were doing. We showed them demos, and they picked us up as our publisher. And then a few months later, they were like, "Oh, we changed the name of Battlezone 2000 to Hover Strike, so you guys
Yeah.
have to change your name now. Like, we can't have Hover Strike and Hover Hunter." So basically, they kind of stole our name and then told us we had to change our name. And we
You
were like, "Man, what the fuck, you guys? Come on! Like, we did this thing, and then you took a game you were developing, you made it more like our game, and changed the name to our name, and like what?"
So
So
I'm
then
actually
we,
working on a YouTube video. So I think I sent you the Journey Through Jaguar CD episode that I did for Highlander.
Mhm.
So I'm working on
Yeah.
the second episode, which is based on Hover Strike. And you know what? What's so weird is I kept coming across Hover Hunter. The
Mhm.
deeper I dove into Hover Strike, there's like a
Uh-huh.
weird contrast. I was like, this is kind of weird. It seems like a conflict of interest, but now I know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But
Yeah. No, they just ripped us off. I have no idea behind the scenes how much they I could go conspiracy theory and be like, oh, they saw our game and just directly ripped us off. And we're like, fuck those guys, we're stealing it all. I have absolutely no evidence of that. And honestly, no reason to believe that. More like it was just clumsy. And somebody was just like, oh, well, we're doing a different thing here. So let's change the name. And they were just sloppy. And then somebody was like, oh, but these other guys are making a game a lot like that and with a similar name. All right, well, tell them to change their name.
well, I
And
have
it was anywhere in between, but either way, it was like it was annoying for us.
Well, in contrast, the demo for Phase Zero that's out, because you guys did we were you in charge of the demo leak, or not leak, but the
No,
release?
no, that was years after I had left the company.
Right, because I know Songbird Production, they sold a variety of, not a variety, but they sold a batch of copies of Phase Zero boxed and all. I think they still are selling them
Mhm.
at some point. I mean, it's obviously a demo,
Maybe.
it's obviously a prototype, it's not a finished thing, but you could
Yeah.
also play it for free through, emulation. And the
Hmm.
frame rate on it is, dude, it's insane. The accelerated engine that's in there, well, I won't say accelerated, but the engine in it is very fast paced. The pop
Yeah.
in, the scale, everything is really, really nice compared to Hover Strike, which in
Yep.
some ways lags. It's you have to, if
Hmm.
you're playing Unconquered Lands, the CD version, you have to turn off like the shake for the hover car. Otherwise, the camera just goes so out of whack. You know,
Hmm.
it's not a terrible game, but it's a very repetitious game versus yours, which feels, I don't want to like gas you up, but it
Unfinished.
feels better. It feels more fine tuned. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember
Um,
reading that you guys originally wanted to do it for the SNES, the Super Nintendo, but you opted in for the Jaguar because of the advanced hardware.
like I said, we started out hacking the Super Nintendo, and our original intent with the company was to try to come up with something impressive enough on the Super Nintendo that we could demo it to somebody and actually get licensed and actually put out a Super Nintendo game.
Mhm.
But we were a little late to that game. We were getting on the Super Nintendo after it had been in the market for a few years and new stuff was on the horizon. And so, when the new stuff started showing up, we got ambitious and got a little lucky and got on board with Atari. Um, so when we were starting out, we were just like, all right, it's our first game. Let's make something simple. We're not going to make the RPG that changes the world. We're not going to make like the ultimate adventure game with the most revolutionary gameplay. Like, let's just make something simple and good. And all right, let's make a shooter. Basic shooter, little top down, like scoot around and shoot things, like the standard, what they call shmups now,
Mhm.
the Gradius, R-Type, etc. And one of my favorites was Thunder Force 2 on the Genesis. Was like a dual mode thing where it had a side scrolling and then it had a top down. And in the top down, it added a little bit of exploration to that genre where like you're going around an infinitely scrolling thing and there were walls and you had to sort of work your way around it. And a shooter like that never included exploration elements. And never did after. That was the only game that I know of that was like a shmup like that you actually had to like find your way around the map and you could backtrack and all that kind of thing. And that was just one of my favorite things. And I was like, we should do something like that. We should do like a shooter with some exploration where you're cruising around on like a landscape and shooting stuff and having to find your way through canyons or whatever. And so we just sort of started building the idea, but it was nothing more than an idea, like one of many that we were talking about different game ideas we could do. And then when we got on the Jaguar, it was like, oh, okay, so what can we do on the Jaguar? We can bring things into 3D, and we have these different algorithms that we're playing with for like rendering things in 3D. And like my brother is the one who's behind the tech really, and made that impressive.
You guys
um
used
and
for
he was
audio
working on landscape stuff. What's that?
for music. You guys used well, I mean, it's outdated now. My understanding was that it was sort of outdated at the time. Screen Tracker on PC.
Yeah, we just used like basically we were like, okay, we're gonna do like a basic tracker kind of thing because we were really big into the demo scene, and that
Yeah.
was like there was a whole world of people who were doing tracked music at the time, mod, S3M, whatever. Um, and so we went looking in the demo scene for people who were able to do music for us,
Right.
and we found a guy and he worked in the S3M format or whatever. So our programmer guys are just like, all right, we'll write up an S3M player for the Jaguar essentially. And they made what amounts to a sort of stripped down S3M player for the Jaguar, and the guy just worked in the format that he knew and made music in that way. And we got pretty cool music that at the time that was kind of a best of both worlds thing, like CD stuff was starting to come out and you could just play raw audio off of the CD,
Mm.
or on the other side you had your Sound Blaster cards or FM chips in systems that just kind of went beep beep boop, and you got more and more channels out of it, but it was still simple synthesizer stuff. But like the tracked sampled stuff was a way to get really really good music out of a relatively simple, relatively low powered system. So we went with that at the time, and that's all that was. That was just the easiest way to get the most bang for our buck out of the audio system.
So if I can interject for a second, Zoom just hit us with the 10-minute timer. I
Oh,
don't want to
okay.
cut the interview short at all. Would you like to do a part two here? Like if I create a new,
Sure.
okay.
Yep. Yep. I got as much time as you want.
And I just want to steal another 30 minutes of your time to get enough out of this. You have
Yep.
a lot of insight, and I'm loving what I'm hearing. So let's do this real quick. We got 8 minutes on the timer. Let me
Hmm.
ask you real quick. For Phase Zero,
Hmm.
would you how complete would you say that leaked demo is? I mean, obviously there's a lot missing.
That's a philosophical question.
Yeah, I
Like,
know it is,
I
but
don't know. Like halfway, because it's like, and I have to answer that question in different ways. Like, what did I think it was back then, and what do I see it as now? Because back then we didn't know what we were doing. That was our first game. we had no idea what game development was. We hadn't done it before, not for real. We had like making a demo and making a really cool little game that you can play and show off to your friends is a very, very different thing
Right.
from making like a completed product that you can put out to people. And the reality of that doesn't hit you until you're halfway through the project and you're just like, oh my God, there's so much to do. And this is taking so much longer than we thought. Um, so I don't know. It was like halfway done. There was a lot of content there. We had planned to have, I think, like 8 levels in the game, and have each level be big enough that it was worth playing an 8 level game, and you'd spend a good while on each level, and there'd be replayability where you could go back and explore and find more stuff, get higher scores, whatever. But we hadn't even really nailed that down. We didn't design document that game seriously. We sort of made it up as we went, and we had a lot of stuff written down. We had a lot of plans, but a lot of it was like, oh, we could kind of do this or this or this, and like we want to do it kind of like this other game, and we want to do this part kind of like this other game, and like as we get there, we're figuring it out. And I think we got about halfway there. I think what was released looks like maybe a 90% game that could just kind of be finished up, and then you'd have the other levels. But in reality, I think it was about a 50%.
That's
I think there would be a lot more work to go back and fully realize what we were trying to do.
That's very unfortunate, honestly. But the Jaguar is no stranger to these types of things. I mean, you got Black Ice, White Noise, Rune of Swords, American Hero, Soulstar, like your game as well. Like, there's so many like quality
Mm-hmm.
games that were Commander Blood even that was coming to the Jaguar that were canned indefinitely, and in some places, a lot of people didn't get a chance to retrieve their assets. My
Yeah,
understanding was that at some point Atari just took the computers and just trashed everything without
yeah,
warning, and that's
yeah.
that's terrible, because for some people these things are their babies. For you, it was your first game.
Mhm.
Like, I'm getting into video game development myself, and I would be completely devastated if I had everything,
Yeah.
stripped out from up underneath me.
All right, here we go.
All right, guys. So we got hit with the infamous countdown from Zoom. So we are in part two with Paul Good from Phase Zero, also known as Hover Hunter. So we were last talking about sound, what it was like, getting into the scene in the first part. Now, the question I want to ask you, I tried to do a deep dive on Web Archive to see if I could find your old hyperimage website. I could not. The only
Mm.
thing I found was one link, just one out of seven that still worked that had your Magic Arts logo. And all it says is coming soon. So I can't see anything about Magic Arts. So let's talk about that. What did you guys do with Magic Arts? I understand you guys at some point kind of split off from each other. Some people went to Sega and PlayStation. You ended up doing your own thing. Tell me about that era of development for the company.
Um, so it's all tied together. Basically, Atari dropped us. We had ambitions for other things that we were trying to do with or without Atari. We always had plans. Like I said, we got licensed on the Saturn and PlayStation just to open up the possibilities, and we didn't have distinct plans, but we were going to do something. And then Atari dropped us, and it was just like, all right, well, never mind everything that we were doing. We need a new direction. And the one guy that had started the company with me visited San Francisco, found a guy there that was looking to get into the video game world and had investment banking background or whatever. And he was like, okay, I'm going to go start a company with this guy. Do you guys want to come along? And we're like, all right, yep, let's just pick up and move, go to San Francisco, make a new company, and just keep doing what we were doing, but with a whole reset because the Atari thing crashed and burned. So now we're going to do something new. And so we moved to San Francisco. I'd never even been there before. I'd heard the legends. I was like, screw it, I'm moving to San Francisco. I'll go live there, whatever. And in parallel with that, we were picking up the job to port Iron and Blood from the PlayStation to Saturn, which, like I said, was a terrible game, but we were hired guns. We were just doing a port. Um, and so yeah, we moved to San Francisco and picked up this new guy as CEO, hired 2 or 3 more people as modelers, animators, artists, level designers, whatever. And we were going there for a little while, and then we picked up a contract with Sony Um, Iron and Blood never got released. We learned our lesson on Atari, and we put in very very clear language on that contract that said if you stop paying us, we stop working.
Mm.
And the job was for Take Two. It was Take Two Interactive in 1997, whenever it was, and they were late paying us a few times. So the whole schedule got pushed back like 3 or 4 months because they didn't have their shit together in accounting or whatever it was. But it's like, okay, we're a month past the deadline here. You haven't paid us. We're stopping working. We're working on our other projects. And then when it came time to release the thing, it was supposed to make it out for a holiday season, like holidays of '97 or whatever. And the suits at Take Two were like, nah, you missed the deadline. We're never releasing it. So they just shelved that project, never coming out.
Damn.
In parallel, along with that, we hooked up with Sony and we started a deal with Sony that was much like the deal with Atari, where we were going to be like a second party developer and make a game that they pitched to us that at the time, and this made a lot of sense in context at the time, the one line pitch was Crash Bandicoot with guns. It was going to be a 3D sort of shoot 'em up kind of thing in the vein of like Contra or Ikari Warriors, but with new 3D graphics and all that kind of thing.
Which game was this?
And well, that's another funny one. That one never came out either. Uh, it goes on. Yeah, I've got endless stories about the chaos of the game industry in the '90s. It was insane. But it's another one very much like Hover Hunter, where we started this game. It was called Alien Earth because aliens had taken over the Earth and you were fighting back. Well, midstream through developing this thing, the Sony guys came to us and were like, so the lawyers saw the name and they were like, yeah, we could do it, but we have a really good relationship with Fox, so we don't want to use the word alien. So
Okay.
you guys have to come up with a new name. So then we just
That's
like
fair
we're like,
though.
okay, we're doing this again. Like, all right, come up with a random name and stick it on. We don't care. Sony guys, come up with a name, stick it on there. We don't care. We're just making the game. And so they called it Legion. It was a random word. The game was called Legion. It also never came out.
I was about to Google it too, man.
You might be able to find traces of it. I don't know. I've never tried to. But yeah, after a year in San Francisco, I bailed out of that company, and that was a bad scene, and I won't get into that right now here. But I got out of that. Those guys kept working on Legion, and eventually that fell apart. It was basically the Phase Zero story all over again, just sub in Sony for Atari,
Damn.
and obviously Sony didn't collapse and kill their platform. They just collapsed a small part of like the office that we were working with and killed that game. So that game never came out. I've been all over the okay, so my claim to fame at this point is I have a credit in Team Fortress 2.
Okay.
And it's silly, and it's only because the Team Fortress 2 mod scene was so huge that like people could get in, they were making maps and hats and weapons and whatever. And I made the silliest, tiniest little thing because like I've been heavily into game modding since the beginning and I've never stopped, like I've been in and out of the industry, but at all times I'm like tinkering with games, making things, modding them, whatever. And I made some pieces of track. They're just little like minecart track in Team Fortress because they had pieces, but they didn't have like 45-degree angles. And I was working on a track and I was like, man, they only have 90-degree angles. I want some 45-degree track. So I made it. It got included in an official map and they paid me for it. So I
Okay.
have a credit on the Team Fortress 2 map now,
But that's a
which
win.
is like,
Like,
yeah, right. Yeah. So like I am a professional game developer officially on a very successful game. And like I've done little stuff on other games here and there that's sort of like that, but like TF2 is the big one that I can be like, haha, I worked on a serious game.
victory is
Uh,
mine. Yeah.
but right, yeah. Uh, but no, I have not personally like seen a real game through to production that actually got released. Like the hell, just the real development, like make a game and work on it all the way through and put it out. I've never done that. I tried a bunch of times and they all got canned or ran into problems or took a left turn somewhere or whatever, and I wasn't involved with them anymore. It's just it never quite worked out.
What's the old phrase? Sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's definitely rough, but I mean, to be fair though, Phase Zero, I would still count it as somewhat of a release. There's a decent following for it.
right. And
There's a
that's what I'm saying. Is like there's a few things like that in my history where it's like, does it count? It kind of counts, right? Like,
I mean, it's on a
so
cartridge. You
I
can
don't
buy it.
I
You can
don't have a
play it.
straight answer to that question, right? Like my best answer is Team Fortress 2, but but
Well, but there's a
yeah,
big following to it within the Jaguar community, which says a lot.
yeah,
The Jaguar community is very small,
yeah,
and
yeah.
there's definitely a lot to be admired. I mean, from what I've played, I was emulating it through Big P Move literally over the week because getting prepared for
Mhm.
this interview. I love it. I like it. The selection screen is good. First of all, the graphics are good. The frame rate is
Yeah,
good. Pop in is good. The effects are good. I mean, could use some music, but yeah,
we had
I'm finished.
something. We
Yeah, no,
had
it's
something good.
good.
If we could have made it out, it would have been pretty awesome. That would have been a really cool first release. To come from nothing to release something like that as our first game would have been awesome. Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you this question then, because I mean, in all fairness, like, there are a lot of people that do like it for the Jaguar. There's like
Hmm.
you got to be a diehard to collect an incomplete game. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
But
yeah, absolutely.
there's a lot of people that like it. You may not have let down the community or anything at all like that, but do you feel Atari may have let you down?
Oh, absolutely.
Is that a bold
Absolutely.
question to ask?
No, 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 no. That is exactly what happened. Atari let down all of their developers at that time. They lied to us. Like, they make no mistake, they straight up lied to us for months.
Right.
Like, they had a contract with us. They were paying us to develop the game. They were our publisher, and it was pretty obvious to anybody who was paying attention the Jaguar wasn't doing well.
Yeah.
Like, there was shit going on. We didn't know exactly what it was. We didn't know for sure that like they were just going to can the Jaguar, but it was looking real dicey. We were like, yeah, okay, they're not doing well, and we don't know if they're struggling or if they're planning to pull the plug or what. But they stopped paying us, and they lied to us for months. They were like, no, 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 it's fine. It's just a delay in accounting. You'll have your money any day now, no problem. And for like 4 months, we kept working on that game faithfully. Like, okay, we don't know whether to believe them, but like we want to make this game, and we're hoping we're going to take them at their word, and we're hoping that they're struggling with us. And then
I
it turned out that they had given up and they were just letting us struggle.
There was okay, yeah. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce his name correctly. Ted Takei, Takichi.
uh yeah, something like that. I remember the name vaguely, but
He was producer, credited as a
yeah.
producer. I reached out to him to do an interview regarding some other games because I believe he worked on Kasumi and something else. I don't know
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
but the question I want to lean into is tell me
Hmm.
tell me what it was like behind the scenes as a community, as the people that you worked with, your friends. Like, were you guys very, very close? Would you say like this was kind of like uh for lack of better definition, a coming of age kind of situation? You know what I mean? Like, just bros
Yeah.
being bros.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'll start closest in and work my way out. Like, my company it started with me and a good friend of my brother,
Yeah.
and then we pulled in my brother, and then we pulled in a good friend of his, and I rented us a house, and we all lived together in the house. Like, it was a very, very tight knit. Like, my bed was in the room where all the computers were set up, and I would be asleep in that room while people were programming, and we had a wall of empty Mountain Dew cans. Like, we were living that life. It was all in. Um, and so, yeah, we were very, very tight. And then going out to the sort of the Jaguar community, Atari's always had that like hardcore hacker, esoteric nerd, like underdog, tight knit sort of thing going on, and you didn't have to go far in the Atari community to find people that vibe with what we were doing and were like, yeah, we're doing this like scrappy, independent, like out of our bedrooms thing, and
Happy
like
Planet.
we're trying to revolutionize things here with a few bucks and a few spare hours. We're trying to put this together and make the dream happen. There were a lot of people like that, and we ended up good friends with a few of them. Just the top two examples that I can think of immediately were the guys that made the Starfighter game. Geez, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It had a fairly generic Starfighter name, but it was like their big thing was they were going to use the cat box and it was going to be networked.
Oh, Battlesphere.
Um, that's the one. Yep.
Yeah.
Scott and Steph and I forget their producer guy's name, who was the hardware guy who made the cat box. But like we were good friends with them, and they were like very parallel to us as far as like they were sort of coming out of nowhere with no budget, trying to put out their first game and trying to make the game revolutionary, like something that nobody had seen on a console. Um, and then the other one, we were good friends with the guys that made Fear, which turned into Tetrasphere, which
Yeah.
is a whole other story.
Well,
Um,
I think somebody, who was it? Somebody recently uh was messing with the 3D engine for Fear. Um,
yeah,
it's not Phobos. Somebody was
yeah.
messing with the engine recently because I saw it come across my YouTube feed. I can't remember who it was, but I think honestly getting Tetrasphere on the Jaguar would have been pretty cool. I mean, it was a hit.
Yeah, yeah,
But anyway, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off. I'm so sorry.
yeah. No, it's just that was it. It's like that's the two best examples I can think of like developers that were really good friends of ours that we were tight with. We were talking to all the time. Every time we went to shows, E3, CES, whatever, like Atari convention things, we're like we'd hook up with them and hang out and compare notes, and the programmers would talk shop and everything, and we'd play each other's games and get really excited. And yeah, it was. And then expanding another step further real quick, I one of the things that I tell people all the time is that first E3, like I was mentioning before, in so many ways it was a pivotal thing. And one of the things that people don't quite realize, and I was right there, I had a front row seat, I was watching it happen. The first E3 was the entire game industry together. It was everything. That was Woodstock, or the fall of the Berlin Wall, as far as like monumental parties that happen in history that could only have happened in that time, in that place. And what I'm getting at there is everybody in the game industry was at that show, and that means all of the developers, tinkerers, hardware guys, everybody. And so we were all coming together, and you couldn't walk 5 feet without running into somebody who was working on something really interesting, who was behind the hardware design for whatever, who was the programmer on something else. And then as it went on, the E3 shows became much, much more about publishers and press, and that was it. And like the interesting developer things like broke out into like GDC and some other things like that. And like the really interesting stuff that was happening at the E3s was getting siphoned out of it, and you were left behind with like nothing but business and marketing. But that first one, it felt like an extended family party. Like all those developers that we were really tight with were there, and they knew somebody else who was there that they were really excited about, that they wanted to introduce us to. And then like a friend of a friend of a friend becomes another friend, and there's just this huge network of like this really tight knit game development community. And that was going on strong at that time in the mid 90s. That was the time and place when that could have happened, and it did, and it was incredible. And uh, there's never been anything like it since. Um, and yeah, I miss it.
It's all good, man. What would you say is your fondest memory of that time? Like, what's the one thing that you cherish more than anything? I'm just curious.
I have so many, but the one that popped up when you asked that question, I'm just gonna roll with. I think this was it had to be the last CES before that E3, which was the one where we were showing stuff at the Atari booth. Everybody was expecting the Saturn and PlayStation to show up because they had just been released in Japan, but they didn't. And so there was like a vacuum that people were looking to fill. So they came to the Atari booth, and like we got way more attention than we expected. And
Yeah.
it was us and the Fear guys were like the highlights of the Atari booth. Like that's who people were paying attention to. They'd come to the Atari booth and be like, yeah, yeah. Oh, this is interesting. What's this? Tell us about this. And it was basically us with Hover Hunter, and the Fear guys were getting that kind of attention. And one of the people who gave us that kind of attention was this guy that was associated with Sega. And he was trying to break out and do his own thing. And he had a contract he was developing with, I don't think it was NASCAR, but it was some racing league company like that had billions of
Indie.
dollars to throw at things, and he wanted to make a racing simulator that was going to be like a game center thing that's a unique experience where they go all out and motion simulation and wraparound screens and all this stuff. And he talked up this hype thing that he wanted to do, and he wanted us to do it. And he took us out and like wined and dined us and was like, okay, I have all these ideas, I want you guys to be the developers for it. I can drop you $2 million to do this project. I'll buy you hardware, I'll set you up in an office. I think you guys have what it takes to take this thing to the next level and whatever. He was just like, it was insane because we were like 22 at the time, like I was 22, my brother was like 19 or 20, and that was it. We were the company, and this was our first thing. We were showing off something at the, like, it was already incredible to us, and then this guy comes along and offers us like
$2 million.
$2 million, and he
Just
took
for
us to the
inflation.
Luxor. Right, he took us to the Luxor Hotel, which is hollow. I had no idea. There's this pyramid that's hollow, and you go in the middle of it. It's got a little town in it, and in the core of that town was a Sega arcade. And this dude walked in and like flashed his Sega business card and was like, "Yeah, I'm in town for this. Can we just get some?" And we just got free games in the Sega arcade for like 2 hours. They had an R360, the full blown like 3-axis gimbal version of Afterburner, where you can fly yourself upside down.
Kidding me.
And it was just like, it was the most incredible night. And when we were walking out of there, my brother had been like mostly maintaining his composure, and he just lost his mind. Like, we were heading out of the place. The guy had gone and it was just us. And we were walking out of the Luxor, and he just stopped and like took his jacket off and threw it on the ground and was like, $2 million, guys, $2 million. Like, picked his jacket up and was like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I can go now. And he stopped and threw his jacket on the ground. Was like, $2 million. What? Like, it was a hell of a night. It was a hell of a time, and we did not take him up on his offer.
Why
We
did you
kept
not?
we kept working on Hover Hunter because we believed in what Atari was doing. And in
No,
hindsight now, right?
no.
Exactly. Right. So you see why when I tell this story, I'm just like, yeah, yeah. Oops.
One
So,
second. Just 1 second, guys. Just gonna, you know. Oh, it's actually getting rid of the fire. There we go. Yeah, just put that up. God, Zoom, you're ruining the moment.
yeah.
God, that sucks, man.
Yeah, no, we had amazing opportunities, and some of them panned out into incredible stuff. I mean, I lived in San Francisco for a year with an office with a view of the Bay Bridge and Oakland. Like, I could sit at my desk and look out over the entire bay, and like I would be working overnight sometimes and watch the sun come up over Oakland and watch the fog clear out and everything. And like, I spent a year doing that. It was incredible. Like, there was so much really cool stuff that happened to us, and then so many missed opportunities to go with them, like games that didn't get released, deals that we maybe should have taken, or maybe they would have gone to an even worse place. You can't know. You can't know. It was a crazy time. Like I said, the whole world was, everybody was tripping over each other trying to spend money on tech. And that was when I found out that it's way easier to get a few $1 million to start a company than to get a few thousand. If you want to start a restaurant, you want a loan of like $30,000 to start your restaurant, man, you got to go through a lot of crap. If you want $10 million of seed money to start a tech company, it's easy. It's just easy. You just talk a bunch of shit to a bunch of investors, and one of them's going to bite and be like, yeah, sure, you have millions of dollars. That sounds like a great idea. I don't understand any of it, but it sounds like tech, and there's money to be made in tech. And like, that's the world we were in. It was crazy.
God, man, my heart. I really hate that for you guys. Like, I didn't know any of that when doing research. I didn't know that you guys had like this many opportunities. I saw that your team broke off somewhere towards the end of the 90s, where, two of your
Mhm.
guys went towards Sega and Sony, and you and your brother kind of went off like in different directions, stuff like that. But I,
Well,
I
no, my brother stayed with the company. What happened was they made a third company. We made HyperImage initially, and then when we went to San Francisco, we made Magic Arts.
Mhm.
And then when the Sony project collapsed on them, like a year after I had left, they were like, okay, we need to restart again. They made Secret Level. Secret Level actually put out a few games that were like horribly panned. They made terrible games because they had tech guys and no more game developers, or no, game designers. And then they sold to Sega, and that became Sega San Francisco. So the eventual version of my company became Sega San Francisco, and then a few years ago they folded that. Um, but yeah, like man, the people in that company have gone places. My brother made technology that you probably have in your pocket. He worked for Google for a while and did some revolutionary stuff.
Cool.
Um, the artist that we had from the beginning, like the fourth guy in the company, he is now the VP of design at Google. Like he's in charge of the Android interface, the whole deal. And it goes on like that. Everybody who went through that company went on to do insane things and all kinds of world changing stuff. It was incredible. I've been in and out of visual effects and video games all my life. And then on the side, there's CAD CAM also, like machining and 3D design and that sort of thing. Basically, if it involves 3D graphics, I've probably done it professionally one way or the other at some point in my life. About 20 years ago now, I discovered an event called MagFest that to me was the seed of the things that were missing out of the E3. Like I went to the first 10 E3s, and by the time it was 10 years on, I was just like, all right, this sucks. I don't even like I'm not even interested anymore. I don't want to go to the thing. It's not even about whether I can afford it or I want to spend the time. It's just when I go there, all I see is marketing. And when I look for the interesting developers and the cool announcements and everything that this show used to be about, it's just not there. I have to go looking other places for it.
Right.
And I found MagFest, and it was a tiny little thing. It was like 200, 300 people. It was a little local convention, and I was like, this is the thing that I've been missing in like the video game community that I saw in the early E3s that isn't there anymore. And I want to build that and support it. So I got involved with that, and I grew MagFest from the little 300 person thing that I found in its second year to uh, like an internationally known, regarded, like they get more than 20,000 people now. It's a gigantic video game and music festival, and that's another whole other long story, and we could do a few hours on that one. So I'm not going to get into it, but real simply, because of my kid, I had to back out of that. So I'm not involved with that anymore. But I did build another multi-million dollar company that is doing amazing things with video games, but this one is more of like it's an event thing where they're doing video game and video game music stuff. There's arcade collectors. The arcade there's like 400 machines every year now. It's crazy.
Okay.
Um,
It's good though.
so yeah, I spent about 10 years of my life doing that, but then I had to sort of back away from that. Um, and these days, right now, I'm starting to work on the Unreal Engine because the visual effects and video game worlds are coming together finally after the dream of decades of people like, oh man, someday video games are going to look like Toy Story, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a video game and a movie.
Yep.
And now it's actually happening. Now it's
Yep.
actually like the Unreal Engine is being used in movie production, and so like I
Unpopular.
said,
Sorry.
if
Go ahead.
anything involved 3D graphics, I was doing it, and now suddenly it's all converging, and my expertise is right there. So I'm trying to get myself into that and learning the Unreal Engine and starting to get involved in like Unreal Engine cinematics and visual effects projects and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm doing with myself these days now.
So we just got hit with 10-minute timer about 2 minutes ago, and I
Yep.
didn't want to interject you at all. But what you're
Yep.
saying about Engine, it's kind of or like telling real from movie and whatever. I felt kind of like the same way when, and this is an unpopular opinion, Final Fantasy Spirits Within the movie came out. I think they had like
Mhm.
150 like computer generated editors and stuff working
Oh
on this.
man, yeah.
But they scored like 120 million into it and barely made anything back. Like that's a whale.
That's another insane story that I had a front row seat to.
Oh, really?
But yeah, yeah.
Can
I
you
mean,
simplify it
well,
real
not
quick?
really front row, but like I was working on a lot of the same. I had a few connections into Square at that time because we were in San Francisco with our company when they were building that movie.
Hmm.
And I was working on a lot of the same software and everything, using the same tools. And yeah, so I knew a lot about that movie. I was paying a lot of attention to it. I knew people that were sort of working on it, people that were working on tools that were being used on it, that kind of thing. And yeah, that movie was incredible, and it fell short of what it needed to be,
Oh yeah.
but the achievement that it was should not be overlooked. It was amazing in so many ways.
I think in some places it still holds up graphically. I know there's a lot of people that weren't a fan of it because it's like, oh well, this isn't Final Fantasy, but
Yeah.
yeah, at least it's not Dragon Ball Evolution. We'll say that.
Right. Yeah.
No,
No, I
we.
mean, I'm not going to defend it as a great movie. It wasn't a great movie. It fell short, but
Oh yeah.
as a technical achievement, it was incredible, and there were a lot of really good things about it, even if even if they didn't quite hit the mark.
So we are on our last 5 minutes.
Yep.
I'm going to say that we'll conclude the interview, and I want to take the time uh, to ask you two questions.
Hmm.
One, where can people find you after watching this documentary? Maybe they can follow your work, your social media, anything at all.
I don't know. You can send them to me. Just give them my Facebook, and they can talk to me. I'm very easy to access. I just don't have a lot of presence on the standard. Like, I don't do the whole like, oh, here's my Instagram address or whatever.
Right.
Uh, but I'm very willing to, like, if random people hit me up on Facebook to talk to me, or Google Chat or whatever, I'm into it. I'm just like, hey, what's up? Yeah, I'll talk to you.
Okay, fair enough. So I'll drop your Facebook link in the
Yeah,
description.
sure.
Cool. All right.
Yeah,
Now,
that's a fine place to start. Yeah.
and the last question that I want to ask you, if you were to give anybody watching this today, like anyone looking into video game development, or maybe they're struggling in the same ways that you guys struggled getting into the scene, what's the best advice that you would probably give them?
I do have a lot of conversations with a lot of kids who are trying to get into it, and I find myself sort of 50-50 between trying to crush their dreams, because some of them are just like, man, video games are great. I'm going to go work on video games, and I'm going to get paid to play video games like it says in the commercials, and I'm just going to sit here and like do and get millions of dollars. And that is not how it works. And I've honestly run into kids who really believe that it's just going to be nothing but fun and games.
How
um,
would you educate that person so that way they know what they're getting into?
Oh, I tell them stories about video game testers. Every tester I've ever known has gotten very disillusioned very quickly. They hate it. They hate the job, because when you're a kid and you look at video game testing from a distance, it's like being a beer tester. You get to just drink beer all day and tell people if the beer's good. That's not how it works. That's
It's
just
not a
not how
funny
it works.
note of pops, you know?
Right. Yeah. That is not remotely how it works. It's the opposite of that. You are cannon fodder for the worst of what that game has to offer. And somebody who makes a lot more money than you is going to be like, no, just run your head into that wall over and over until you go through the wall. I know. I know. You're here to test a bug. Don't screw around in the rest of just run your head into that wall and then write up a report about what happens. And you will spend all day running over and over into the same wall, and then you'll write up a report about it, and you'll be like, I figured it out. I'm clever. I got this. I ran into your wall and I figured out the exact condition that makes me go through the wall like I'm not supposed to. You'll write the whole thing up, and then they'll ignore you, and the game will ship with that bug, and people will be able to run through that wall, and you'll be like, I told them. I did all the work, and they didn't listen to me. And that's the kind of stories that I get from video game testers all the time.
Hmm.
And that's the beginning of it. But then the other side of what I do is I do try to educate people in terms of, like, it's all just sitting right there. If you want to make games, if you have dreams of making games, just make them. Like, don't wait for anybody's permission to do it. Don't wait to get signed on to something. Don't wait to go through school to have somebody teach you. Like, today, far more than ever, you can literally download the best game engine in the world that, like, the most popular games of all time are using for free, and it runs on anything that qualifies as a gaming computer remotely, and you can just make a game for free, and, like, legitimately you can release it for free. They don't even bother you until you start making real money. Like, the licensing arrangement on that stuff is like, if you make less than 100,000, we don't even care. So you can literally just download the engine that the top level professionals are using, make a game with it, put it out, make money, be a professional game developer, and it's all just right there. It's easier than it's ever been. There's tutorials and everything, and yeah, just go
We,
for it. Just do it.
we are on our last 60 seconds. I want to say thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time, Paul. You have
Yeah.
been an insight into a window that I could have never fathomed, and I just want to say thank you for your time. And
Anytime. I love
thank you,
talking about this stuff with people.
and thank you guys for watching. I've been Kaz Denizon with Crash Productions. This is Atari Dev Space, and we're so grateful for your viewership. Thank you so much, guys.
Later.